Welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. After a series of mass shootings, NYC elected leaders came together to create the nation's most comprehensive gun package. However, a Supreme Court ruling just expanded gun rights, making it easier to access a firearm. Assemblymember Kenny Burgos joins us to discuss what this ruling means for New York City. Assemblymember, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Kibin. How you doing?
Now, after recently announcing your effort for stronger gun legislation, the Supreme Court has made a decision that goes against this. Can you tell us more about that ruling?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court overturned a 112-year law here in New York City and New York State in accessing a concealed carry permit. It was a devastating blow here in New York where we are plagued by gun violence. But I'm proud to say that last week we did our due diligence and hopefully fixed it.
Now, what were your initial thoughts when you heard this?
My first initial thoughts were, this would only lead to more gun violence. We've seen a rise in this violence in our city, in our state, in my own district. And I'm a big believer that if you're going to increase access to guns, whether legally or illegally, it's unfortunately going to lead to more gun violence because that's what the numbers show us. So I had some real concerns when this decision was made. But I'm hopeful that our new law will then protect New Yorkers going forward.
Now, I was shocked to see that this will include the 5 boroughs of New York City. What did gun laws look like previously for New York?
So previously, this concealed carry permit, where the Supreme Court ruled on it, said that it was unconstitutional, was that it required a special reason in order to access this permit. If you were a security guard or your life was in danger, and there was a litany of other reasons that you could have applied for the permit. So what we did post-ruling was, not make it a special reason because there is an argument to be made that it may go above and beyond the Second Amendment. But we changed the framework and made it, quote unquote, more constitutional because we still want to make sure it's, still a very deliberate process and very responsible in the manner in which we allow licensing of a concealed carry weapon.
Now, historically, it has always been harder to retrieve guns in larger, highly populated cities. Why do you think the Supreme Court would make this move that would combat this?
Kibin, we have undoubtedly a more conservative, some would even say more radical Supreme Court at this moment. Many who believe wholeheartedly in the Second Amendment as this blanket right to weapons. I would also argue, with the exception of Justice Sotomayor, none of them have ever lived in New York City to know the dangers that this may cause when there's 9 million people living in a small, finite amount of space and have that kind of access to weapons. So I can't say for certain why they made this ruling, but I can say for certain that we fought back.
And how do you think this is going to affect many boroughs, in our city that are already struggling with gun violence? And a lot of people, even before this ruling, were afraid. So, how do you think this is going to affect our citizens now that this has passed?
Well, I don't think we'll see too much of a change because the decision came down from the Supreme Court and we acted in Albany. Not mistaken, less than 10 days later, we changed the law to fit within the framework of the Supreme Court ruling. So I don't think New Yorkers will see a large difference in their daily lives. I'm very hopeful and expecting no increase in gun violence. But it was a tough decision that was made by the Supreme Court that we saw come down. But like I said, we fought back. We passed our law just less than 10 days later, and I don't think New York will see much of a difference.
And I want to talk about that a little bit. I know there was a ban in public areas, and there are certain bans. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So yeah, the new law, first of all, changed the licensing period from 5 years to 3 years. And then we made sure to put in a lot of sensitive locations where even if you have a license to carry a concealed weapon, it would still be a crime to carry a weapon in these places such as the subway, schools, public parks, federal, local, and state government buildings. And we have a very, very long list, including places like Times Square. So we were very responsible and deliberate in making sure that we protected people and designating areas that we wouldn't want to see a gun. And we don't want to see a gun, honestly, in most places in public spaces, but we're also limited by the Constitution and federal law and what we can outlaw from having a gun-free zone. But we made a very extensive list that I think New Yorkers will be happy to see.
And I also know there was an effort to bring social media into this. And I know just based on what we've seen in the past few months, social media plays a huge part just in gun violence and what we're seeing with gun violence. So can you tell us more about social media in this regard?
Well, I think there's no question that social media has been uh, a big factor in a lot of our recent mass shootings. I mean, it's unfortunate just yesterday on Independence Day, we had a mass shooting take place in Highland Park, Illinois. The suspected shooter had gone through YouTube, and he's had videos, indicating that he was prone to violence. We've had shooters from Buffalo to Uvalde, and every single time, the common denominator is there's some sort of social media impact here. And that's why here in New York State, we've changed the laws there as well. We've required social media companies to have a very, very strong plan and a very focused plan on addressing, these kind of fringe groups and these people that have a propensity to incite violence. And we're making these social media companies, responsible. We're holding them accountable because they have a responsibility to make sure that their platforms do not lead to violence in the real world.
And I know for New York, there's either an effort or it actually was passed that people who have guns have to turn over their social media information. I think it was about three social media sites if they have them. Do you think that will be helpful just going forward?
I think it's helpful. I think any and everything that we can do to mitigate and prevent violence will be helpful. I would never lie to people and say that there's not a single law that can prevent violence 100% outright, right? All we can do is put our absolute best effort in mitigating this violence and use every single resource we have available. So I think, having individuals give up their social media accounts, and give up is the wrong term, but essentially just identify the social media accounts is going to be helpful. Is it going to prevent every single mass shooting? No, unfortunately not. But it absolutely will be helpful in the fight against it.
Now, the last time you were here, we talked about ghost guns in our city. Now, now that we've seen everything that's happened, do you think that the access to legal guns could possibly eliminate or just lower the use of ghost guns in our city?
I'm not sure what that relationship looks like, right, whether inversely or not. But like I said, I'm just a strong believer when you increase the access to guns, whether legally or illegally, you're going to have more gun violence. I mean, if you go to CDC data, you look at the states that have much more lax gun laws, states like Wyoming, Florida, Louisiana, they have much higher death by firearms per capita than New York. I tell people New York is actually the bottom five lowest state in regards to deaths by firearm. So it's proven right there when you have more relaxed gun laws, you're going to have more gun violence. So I think with this change and the possible increase in legal guns, unfortunately, it can lead to a bit more gun violence. But that's why we're making sure we address from all angles to make sure it doesn't happen.
Now, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas spoke out saying New York's previous requirements prevented law abiding citizens from exercising their Second Amendment right, and its licensing regime is unconstitutional. He's been in the news a lot for a lot of controversial things. What do you say to that?
I have a lot of comments for Justice Clarence Thomas, but in regards to the question, I wholeheartedly agree with the terminology used, regime. As lawmakers in New York, our first and foremost priority is to keep New Yorkers safe. We have a constitutional right in the Second Amendment to bear arms, but I don't believe that to be a blanket right where people have access to, military grade weapons or weapons on demand. I believe that, even the founding fathers would agree that there have to be other responsibilities in place. The founding fathers didn't see a city of 9 million people right here cramped into a small space. The founding fathers didn't see these high grade, high impact assault weapons that we have today. So I think we have to keep our laws with the modern times and protect people. We can still give them their right to bear arms, but it has to be done in a very responsible manner that does not put other people's lives at risk.
And although in New York City, we did make efforts to protect our citizens, what message does it send to our entire country who's already facing a lot of issues with gun violence? And as you mentioned, we just saw one recently during July 4th.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you're saying what message is sent in regards to the Supreme Court ruling or with our
Oh,
laws?
what message is it sending to our country that they would be a little bit more relaxed when it comes to gun laws, even though we're facing a lot of mass shootings?
I think it shows the Supreme Court is out of touch. I think on the wake of yet another mass shooting just yesterday, I mean, I think since the Supreme Court ruling, we've had probably over a dozen mass shootings. And if you can't take that into account, if you can't see through that lens that this decision is irresponsible, then I don't know what gives. It sends the wrong message to America. You know, America being the most armed country probably in history, and yet we're not the safest. You know, mass shootings is almost part of our culture, unfortunately. And I think the Supreme Court's decision will have ramifications for years.
Now, how can people stay up to date with you? You're always talking about things that are happening, and you're always making an effort to protect New York City and the Bronx. How can people stay up to date with you?
Certainly, social media is always probably the easiest form of access. All my social media accounts are at Kenny Burgos NY. That's for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. My office is over here in Soundview, 1163 Manor Avenue. And you can go on my website too at nyassembly.gov. So stay in touch.
All right, Assemblymember, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Kibin. I appreciate it. Take care.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.